If you don't aim for the future, you will miss it. In this episode, I would like to speak about how we direct the human attention. And so, what is the value of the future? You know, for a lot of people, the future is a source of suffering. It's a source of anxiety, anxiousness, not anxiety. I would tell you that I have envisioned my future be limited to how I perceive my past. So if I feel my past was very long, I feel my future's uh, outcome is more significant. It's like the more you feel you've contributed to something, the more you feel involved to see it. And so if we consider every human being has an outer realm and an inner realm, that means the sight that you see when you open your eyes, in front of your eyes, your outer realms, and when you close your eyes, how you exist to yourself as a subject. So we're in actuality, we're wondering about the future of an object and the future of a subject, right? But now the interesting thing is the future is a subject. So we're wondering about a subject's subjective future, you know? Wayne Gretzky, this hockey legend, he has this quote where he says, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And sometimes I wonder that do we miss out on the future if we don't care to aim for it, to look at it, to concentrate on it? That means it's like, what do you do after you have meditated in the here and now? You let the here and now be the future. There is something the human being seeks, whether it's just survival, whether it's ideological continuity. Hang on, guys, I gotta set up the shade here. The sun's in my face. Okay. The sun lets me see my face, but is also in my face. Okay. I think what it is that our body is separate from the world, so we have the concept of location, but our mind can't be separate from the world, for to the mind, to the observer, it just starts. That means you just start in existence. When we look at even the child psychology, if you remember, I'm pretty sure everybody's like this to some degree, that if you try to remember your earliest memory, you will suddenly notice you woke up in a personality. We wake up into an archetype of self. What that means is we look at stuff in the world and we're like, yo, let's name this stuff. And we looked at ourselves in the mirror and we named ourselves, and we have been going on thinking that we're just stuff, you know? But there's something more happening. You know, I was having a conversation with my twin brother. I have a twin brother. And I remember I used the metaphor of we were sitting on the grass. I was telling him that it's like the wind that is moving all the grass. The grass are being moved by the wind, but they are not of the wind. That means if the grass tries to comprehend the wind like the grass, it will never. And I feel that there is something that is moving things in accordance to an intelligence. And it's so complex to wonder about the cause of this intelligence, because it can be divided into something there before the thing was here, or something that is just based on the thing. An intelligence that was always there, as if the answer to a problem was always there. Somebody just noticed it, saw it. And then some situations where the problem is new, the answer is new. It's as if there is two kinds of birth. There is a physical birth where you arrive here as an object. You enter the world. You know, the verb entering the world applies, you know. But I would say when it comes to the birth of the subjective self, that is different. Jacques Lacan, yeah. This French philosopher, he says the mirror effect, the most important moment, the child sees itself in the mirror. So from the moment that we could notice ourselves, we have named ourselves, and we have gone with a story, with a sort of program that can apply itself in a, I don't know, cultural framework. I went through a very unique transition of mindset, I would say, from the years before 2011 to after, onwards to even the present moment. First, the future was something I was chasing. The future seemed as if it's like the whole point of life actually seemed like chasing something, you know? But I could tell you there was a suffering in how I was chasing, or how I wanted the desires that would just arise in my mind, you know? It's as if I was aiming for the future, but I was not aiming in accordance to who really was there in the present. That means the sense of the relationship I had the future, rather than it became being a journey with unknown variables that as the person takes steps it happens. You know, it was like a preset image. It was as if it was as if I was acting like destiny. My inner realms were acting like they were the destiny of the outer realms, and there was an arrogance there. And I remember I called it a karmic quarantine. I felt that there was something missing. I didn't know what it was, you know? And so it was I would say it was a time where it was easy for me to break myself in my inner realms. You know, after some point it becomes hard because it doesn't make any sense for the person to even consider. Like it is true. Like the person could be, you could fall down on a soccer pitch, but you just get up and start continue playing the game, you know? So anyways, before 2011, this sense of a karmic quarantine, this sense of I was trying to go towards some sort of a future self-imposed ideal, and there was turbulence. Then I became very preferenceless. You know, I remember it was one of the most unique phases of my life where I would say, I think for like 2 years, I had no opinion on anything. It was a sort of silent, it was like literally being a wind in the world. What that means is you move some things, but you're not there. There's nothing there, you know? So I could say at first I wanted to find my future. I was running after trying to find my future. Then I became preferenceless. I noticed the present. When I noticed the present, I noticed how the past had come this far. And there's something incredible. When you see your own past, when you see the past of your planet, when you look at history and you realize it was his story, it was a story. When you realize the world is kept in story, there comes a new authorization. The experiencer is allowed to move before its definition. And that is freedom for the inner realms. That is truly how we can make the unconscious conscious, by consciously communicating with our unconscious. What it means that is that we have to, the tip of the iceberg that is out in the observable universe has to trust the invisible part of the iceberg, you know? So I remember after 2011 an incident occurred, and I went into this phase where I went into this renunciate phase. I remember I was going in accordance to some sort of intuitive righteousness, and that intuitive righteousness was as if like I didn't even feel like moving an object. It was as if everything was okay from the beginning. It was man's disturbance. So one can say that in the mystical experience, there reaches a point where the only thing that's extra in the world is actually you, the idea of you. And yet everything is just there. Nature is just happening. It doesn't matter if you see a bird flying in the sky and call that a good bird, bad bird. It's a bird, you know? Now the bird can choose. But my point is that I chased my future. I wanted to find my future. I couldn't find it. I became preferenceless. I managed to see my moment in a way where it wasn't owned by me. That means I started to notice that I am not owned by my name. The name is just sound in there. What we really are is silent, vast continuity of a massive event, of a cosmic event. So pretty much that preferencelessness phase that I went through, it was a very strange time. It was like I felt like a fool. Like literally like had I was walking very simply. Here's the thing, I hadn't realized the inner realms are I had realized the inner realms were there. I just hadn't realized that the inner realms was me. Like actually. That means all those people who are seeing synchronicities, what if you were never an individual and that is why you see? Every civilization has to wear a mask because in the tasks ahead, one cannot be true. Let me tell you, it's just the way society is designed. The more there is a pattern of dishonesty, the more okay it is to be dishonest because that's what people are doing. But the more honesty there is, the more it becomes okay to be honest, you know? I realized that my future is based on how I create it in the present. What that means is how you live is how you're going to remember yourself in the future. That means if in this moment I suddenly dishonor myself, dismiss my own vision and just kind of do, it's as if I have created that memory for the future self I will be. So that's the thing about, I would say, it's not just having fun, it's noticing the quality of experience as you're existing. Noticing that quality can generate bliss, and it can also lead to a recognition, I would say kind of like in a Qigong Tai Chi way, where energy is everywhere. When you realize this, when you realize that all colors are energy, when you realize everything is, that's the secret. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Now, what if energy is consciousness? So from that, I'm just remembering exactly from that preferenceless stage, it was as if like the world was happening, everything was happening. You turn on the news was the news. I would consider it, but something had made my sincere attention not just be on how the story of the world was. Something had made me disinterested in the story of the world. And from that state of disinterest, there was just pure novelty. I can tell you that one of the most incredible moments in this life is when you realize you don't know anything, but truly you realize you don't know anything. Because that's when all the doubt, all the imposition of the untrue breaks. You see, the whole issue with the greed of human beings is that the future is important. That means two people could be totally nice, but suddenly if something in the future is unfair between the two, then suddenly they change. You know, this is why they say don't do business with family. Why? Because it ruins. Because it's like a 50, it's you're gambling on just the continuity of the relationship. When money gets involved, suddenly it's like who was a friend yesterday has become like uh, deception's face. I mean, like, I was just thinking of Loki, you know. Uh, the archetype of the Joker in Nordic mythology, you know. Some things appear. Like how many Greek legends, you know, when you look at really the issue with gods is that they're deceived. That means when you look at, I mean, in a polytheistic sense, you know, the thing about gods is that they could be fooled. Gods, I'm speaking plural, not like the absolute, you know, one and only. I'm saying like in the sense that like there's stories of Indra in Vedic thought, the king of heaven, and Indra does something wrong. There's a man who's more virtuous on earth than a god in heaven, you know, and Indra is like the king of heaven in Vedic thought, you know. So Indra sees this person on earth who's way more virtuous. Indra gets jealous, the god gets jealous, and the god does something, and then there is a karma for the god. You know, something happens that the grandchildren of the person that Indra disturbed on earth went to, broke into the heavens or something, you know. And then Vishnu came and brought balance again. There's a story in the Mahabharata, I'll tell you. Indra pretty much is losing heaven to the descendant of like this guy who Indra was jealous of or something. And so what happens is Indra loses heaven and goes to Vishnu and says, Vishnu, I need to get heaven back. And Vishnu's like, don't worry, go, I'm with you. And so what happens is in heaven, you know, this human being has come and taken the throne of heaven, and Indra is there, and there's some sort of, I don't know, some sort of dialogue, which I don't remember. And what happens is Vishnu changes his shape into a dwarf in heaven. I don't know, like this is just a story written like thousands of years ago, the Mahabharata. But the whole idea of it is that Vishnu is there in the crowd, Indra is there trying to get back his throne from the descendant of this human being. And so what happens is that the human being who's there, who's taking control of heaven, notices that Vishnu is watching from the crowd as the dwarf. And he says, you can have as much as the steps this dwarf takes or something, you know, and the dwarf is actually Vishnu. And so what ends up happening is that the dwarf suddenly ends up becoming a giant, and each of its steps is like all the space it's taking from heaven. So long story short, the human descendant that had come in to take heaven, returns to earth, and Indra returns back to his throne, now having seen the karma. You know, that means who knew? Gods in plural have karma, but the one and only, I mean, technically, even though Vedic thought is polytheistic, but it has all one source. Like everything is God's stream. In Vedic thought, I believe it's like, I don't know, 54 million years of human life is like 3 days of Krishna sleeping. Vedic thought is so beyond this world that we're like, all right, we'll leave it. So, anyways, we can say the purpose of matter is to continue existing. The purpose of the experiencer through matter is to continue existing well. I feel that when I look at the future of the physical component to my moment of being, I see its outcome. Its outcome is that it's just a position in space and time, in the space time continuum. It's an opportunity, really, the physical reality. And so, this physical reality, its future is a return to the Gaian body. That means little do people know that the attention will say goodbye even to the periodic table. That's the destiny of the physical body. It's literally like the candle. Like a candle, the mind is like the candle flame, the body is the candle wax. So every day we exist, it just happens once. It's like, what's up with that? But when I look at the future of the mind, it doesn't have the future of the body. The mind is not an object, it cannot break. The mind, believe it or not, we consider it as a subject, but it's not even a subject, it's not a name. It can't even be given a world. It can't even be put anywhere, the mind. So what it is that conceivable conditions are leading to an awareness of the unconditional. First, it occurred for me from that preferenceless state. I wrote a lot of poetry, a lot of books. Just went in like 1 year. I remember I made this strategy where I would write like a little bit of every book. So I had like 10 projects, 10 books, and every day I would be recording like a chapter of it or writing a chapter of it. So I went on this kind of suddenly from being super preferenceless. Nature was like, okay, this person's mind is too empty. Let's fill it up, you know. And so and then after I trusted every intuitive impulse, every inner wave, every sort of kind of signal that I felt came from within me rather than outside of me, as I trusted those signals, so I remember I wrote a lot. Then in 2014, I remember it was also a reason I started these talks is because when a person speaks, they can get a lot out. It's much quicker than writing. Sometimes when you want to write something, like your attention goes to how the architecture of the sentence wants to be, it brings down the speed of actually what you want to communicate. I trusted the signals, the intuitive signals, pretty much. And from 2014 to 16, you know, from 2014 to 16, I would say without trust, the mind can't do its work here. And this trust requires to be beyond story. I would say 2014 to 16, where I started these talks, there was something different from the moment. There was something intuitively different from the moment, I would say. That it was as if there was a simultaneity. There was, I would say from 14 to 16, I had a attachment to my intuition, a very deep attachment to my intuition. What that would mean is I would literally go, whatever I would decide to do, I would feel. So I would process, I would calculate, like I would look at things, but then I would feel. I would feel out the moment technically. And there would always be some sort of intuitive um, feedback. And I would say that intuitive feedback sometimes, especially in 14 to 16, I was in UK. There were times where that intuitive feedback saved me. There were times where instantly I just knew what I had to do, and it was, I don't know how to tell you, it was literally like um, instant snapshots. As if imagine, I don't know, poetically, your future self um, already knows what you're going to do, so it's prepared things, you know? It was as if I had real noticed the selfless experientially, but I hadn't uh, found the trust of it in the outer realms yet. I trusted my inner realms. I trusted my inner realms, but not in the outer realms completely. After 2016, there was this insight that I realized everything is in my sight. I stopped shaping the perceiver that I am. on a level that it couldn't even have assistance. So what that means is there's this notion of like angels, like a guardian angel. Now, if you think about it, the guardian angel is like the emanation of God, but then the idea is God needs a guardian angel for itself. Because what is man? It is God's creation, but where did the soul for man come from? You ask every theologian, it was imbued, it was given. Do you know? Life was given. So the question comes, what was given? Do you know? And so the answer is, it's like God is within everyone, and you ask him, what's the soul? It's the mystery of God. You ask too many questions, blasphemy, and you're like, oh my God. You know? Now it's such an interesting time that I think spiritual people feel like in the outer realms, it's like materialism is like the Inquisition. And when it comes to a certain, you can say, religious context, the Inquisition was there from the beginning. You see, some ideologies, they don't have room for you to change. I will tell you that it's like the religious experience is like trying to fit into a costume, trying to fit into clothing that isn't yours. My experience with religion, which doesn't necessarily make the concept invalid, but in regards to my relationship with language, I will tell you, language can enslave a person. That means it's like you think about physical enslavement, shackling the person with a chain. You think about like, oh my God. You think about the mind's enslavement. The mind has been shackled by chains of language, by ideological systems, you know? In Greek mythology, you know, the Titans were enslaved. And I don't know what it was. I think it was a show I saw. It was a film I saw. Was it in the film Immortals? I don't know. But it was like, there was something where it was like chains of lightning. Do you know? It's fascinating. We're just caged by language that comes from our environment, or language that comes from us over the environment that doesn't change. So after 2016, something very strange happened where in my inner realms I felt way older than I am now. And it reached a certain point, especially getting closer to now, where I felt the identity I had held in some part of my memory, in my unconscious of myself, had gotten old to, I don't know how to tell you, it's as if like I had died to myself. Because I had died to myself, there was no self that could doubt, no idea that could fear. Do you know? So life became a sort of unknown presence. Oh my God, this bee is on my coffee. What is this? Okay. Excuse me. First, the person, just like driving, when you drive at first, when you don't know how to drive, you don't have a trust. Your attention is more on inside the car than outside of the car. But if you've driven for hours, then it's, you don't think about the inside of the car. Everything inside of the car is in your second nature, in your attention. You know, you focus on the outside. And so in regards to intuition and the mind, it's strangely very similar, where in 2014 to 16 I was focused with inside the car, So I was driving my inner realms, but I wasn't driving it uh, with, as if it, with comfort in my own ability. Then from 2016 onwards, that comfort appeared, and there was this strange notion of no more a self to die. It's like that game had become boring, which is a very strange view, I would say. But it was this notion of like endless selves have endlessly changed in my mind. Like when I think about how many versions of myself from the beginning of my life till now, through how many different days I've woken up as a new self and experienced the realm. First, you think attachment is wrong, you detach. Then you think detachment is wrong, you attach. Then you think attachment is wrong, then you detach. Then the mind will realize to consider attachment, detachment is wrong. Then there will be an oscillation from the void. That means you could say these are three phases towards reverse engineering back into the source of all intelligence. From infinite unconscious movement, we have duality. So one has to study the relationship they have when they wonder about what does it mean for something to be infinite, endless, and what does it mean for something to be like the yin yang symbol, I could say very simply, duality. That means thinking about if infinity could be good or bad. Then I would say from the phase of going from the infinite to the dualistic, studying that relationship, then the person studies the dualistic with the singular. A lot of people who step beyond language at first, a lot of mystics, that's what they're studying, the relationship of the singular with the dualistic when it comes to a person seeking truth. So imagine you had such trust in the infinite that it was no longer being considered. You just knew it was there. And let's say you had such trust in the dualistic, oh my God, that you knew it was there, you don't have to think about duality anymore. And then you came to the, let's say, singular and the void, the last duality of conception, the relationship of space and what's in it. So then imagine you treat the singular is everywhere, that's trusted too, and then the void is the last thing left to trust. And when you trust these four dimensions, there is inseparability of experience and existence as simultaneity as everything. Then life doesn't become centered around the idea of you. And technically, I would say that's in Vedic thought. I would say I personally see parallels to that's when reincarnation stops, because there is no world for there to be reincarnation in. There is no self to repeat. You free nature. You return this rent a body, like rent a car. You know, we've rented a karma. And so as the karma is returned back to the earth, the ever-present no longer needs to be a concept. When you don't need to be a concept, every action is the activity of your universal sector. So that means no longer you get angry at people. They are the behavior of your universal sector. You know, this is the only way I have found that I could manage to conceive of a tolerance. Because this life is very easier, like this is what's going on, where it's easier to be chaotic than ordered. And our resolution to the chaos, instead of trying to build an advanced civilization in the future, is like, oh man, we don't like the chaos, let's just forget it and go to the present moment only. So my issue is that I can see the value in the here and now, but if you're here and now and you're not doing anything, then what's the point of knowing the here and now? Realizing you're in the here and now. You know? People wait. People wait a lifetime to see they've been waiting for themselves. The future requires to be aimed for. The non-dual has never been in an illusion. You know? That means it's this mentality that the mind of the universal sector has been enlightened from the beginning, as if nature is enlightened. Because it's impossible to try to free yourself when the world isn't free. That means think as if you had everything you wanted, but you see suddenly millions of people are suffering. What's the point? What's the joy? Is the joy through arrogance? You see, if we weren't human beings, like it might have been easier if other extraterrestrials, like let's say it was a, you know, we had, let's say in the future, an advanced civilization where actual extraterrestrials and aliens could also become members of the human civilization. They could be an alien, but they could have like human citizenship. Okay. So if something happened to an extraterrestrial, we as human beings may not care. You may say there could be actually extraterrestrial racism in the future. Seriously, like we might be like, there might be so many people who are uncomfortable with an alien life form living among us, for example. I'm thinking maybe 500 years in the future if we get there. And the biggest question is, what do you do when you're in the here and now? What do you do? Let's say everybody who says, okay, Mr. Within, whatever, there's still a truth to find. Okay, let's say you found truth. What then? Is truth an escapism from the responsibility of humanhood? Or is truth the utility of it? It's like you're alive once. I feel that the yogic mind has a lot of wisdom, but it also took the world too seriously. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, having never left the house, you're looking for the way home. This is why all those people who felt that enlightenment was years and years of practice, they were there was a foolishness there. Because where can truth be if everything we're accessing is momentary? Imagine we knew the truth to such a degree that if we actually knew the truth, we never needed a concept for it. So you can say finding truth is the destruction of the concept of truth. That means the state that, I don't know, maybe I'm seeing the analogy too oceanic. You know, at best, it's an empty canvas. At worst, the paintbrush was never here. And an empty canvas suggests that the purpose of life is to draw in the dimensions. And so it has become easier to escape the task than to endure through it. I think it is the greatest display. I remember seeing the Niagara Falls and hearing the sound of the Niagara Falls before actually going to it. And the sound of it gives you the feeling of the presence of nature's event, you know. And when you really look at what is going on on this planet, the idea of common sense is an uncommon rare event in the cosmos. You know, it's like, is a creature aware it's a creature right now? You know, like, do you see how phenomenal that is? It's like there's a battle with the past. You win that battle. Your past no longer bothers you. No sense of notion or idea of the past bothers you. There's a battle in the present. You attain this battle, and nothing happening also doesn't bother you. Then the only thing that is left, I would say, is the battle for the future. And that's where the reason for living is. The reason of you can't find a purpose to life if you look at it just in accordance to being present. You know, that means energy doesn't have a life purpose. Or energy doesn't have a career. Energy conscious of itself can't have a name. I mean, seriously. It's like, are we nature happening, or are we the human story? Are we a fabrication of nature? Are we nature's hallucination? Or are we the real thing? I think it's a good thing, because if we all wanted to, let's say you wanted to be the size of the whole cosmos right now, then there would be nothing to do if you're the size of everything, you know? One thing I noticed about the future is that it requires input. And you have to ask yourself, where's the input for the future coming? That means, let's say if the future is a program, who's writing this program? You know? And you see every action of every human being on the earth alongside everything else that's happening. So what it is the surface of the earth is this endlessly changing program, and the programmer, we have managed to somehow simulate in a certain part of the program as a programmer to ourselves. So that's the strange thing, you know. There's nothing in like animal life that tells you that the animal should be aware of its more than its environment. Like when you think of the concept of an animal, it comes with a world, with with an ecosystem, you know. But man is the animal that stepped out of one ecosystem and is like, okay, I want to go somewhere else. Let's see what else is there. It's like when you think about it, it's like that's the leap. Imagine all the animals in the zoo suddenly stood on their two legs, adjusted their vocal cords, and started speaking like people. Everybody would be like, no way. This whole time we've been treating animals like idiots, but they've actually had the potential to be as conscious as we are. There is a scene the in the in this Japanese comic-based show called Shingeki no Kyojin, Attack on Titan, where there's this captain and this general commander named Levi. The captain is named Levi, the commander is named Erevin. And they're in this weird world where there are these giants that eat people only. They don't eat animals, they don't eat anything. They only eat people, these random giants that are set in this fantasy world. Okay? And humanity is held behind these giant walls, and these giants have been kind of harassing humanity ever since, you know. And they don't. Humanity has no idea like where these giants come from and why they're constantly trying to make the human species go extinct, right? Then at some point they realize these giants are human beings, and their whole like for centuries they've been just defending their kingdom, killing these giants, you know, before the giants could kill them. And then they realized the identity of these giants were human beings, and then they get shocked, you know. And Levi's just gets shocked when they realize this, and Commander Erwin is smiling, you know. And Levi is like, hey, Erwin, why are you smiling? As if Levi is horrified. And Erwin says, at least now, regardless of how chaotic it was, we know a bit more about the truth. That's the effort, really. I can't see any greater purpose to human beings, to humanity's future, other than exploration. And if we unify and integrate in our explorations, it's going to be globally efficient. If we don't, I don't know. Show and tell, I guess. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to see what leader of a nation. In my science fiction novel, I've written this concept of the enlightened society. My science fiction novel, of course, is set in the year 5025, and there's like 9 parallel dimensions to it. In it, there's a government called the Enlightened Society. This is the first government that is conducting a bunch of Earths. Like it's one government that is conducting 9 parallel dimensions of Earth. The different first parallel dimension government, pretty much. Now, the way I said that the Enlightened Society began was that instead of, for the first politician that was an artist was voted in as the politician. And what this politician did was, instead of investing the funds of the nation in, for example, like making it itself more of a like potential for increasing its potential for violence, instead this politician was an artist. He's like, I'm gonna make my nation the most beautiful. And this politician began deciding to make the cities, investing all the funds into making the actual day-to-day living of the people efficient. you know. Now look at what happens. Look at what I wrote in my story. When one politician who's an artist makes the country most beautiful, human beings have greed. This is how we use greed, guys. We make people compete for the efficient. So what that means is when the first artist, politician made the most beautiful city, other nations were like, no, I'm not going to let that city be more beautiful. That nation be more, not city, sorry. That nation be more beautiful than my nation, you know? And world leaders for the first time began fighting over which nation in the world was more beautiful, more epic, more high quality. As standards of living increased next level all over the planet, imagine. Do you know what happens then? Minds are comfortable to begin their greatest work. We will have the most advanced engineers and the most genius ideas enter, just appear like Pokemon out of nowhere on our planet if we find peacefulness. If people can trust outside their door, just like how they trust their home, there will be some sort of next level projects taking place after that. Because I'm telling you, you need first, of course, a respect for nature, but then trust. Without trust, a person, I don't know how you can build something. You know, if I don't trust myself, I can't be a self. Trust is like the key to the door. Everything can have a future. You know, even the most meaningless stuff, you know, the most meaningless thing, you can write a story and eternalize it. I would say that this is Mr. Within's comment on anybody who has been experientially through non-duality for a while. When it comes to the future, it's this attitude of touching something without touching it. This is so crucial for anybody who wants to actually use their mind, open up their mind. That means we have to trust the outer realms. After you have trusted the outer realms, you don't doubt the outer realms. So that means you have some sort of stability in the outer realms. Once you have that stability in the outer realms, then you're comfortable to move your inner realms. You know, that means that anything that happens in your inner realms, it doesn't have to constantly relate to the outer realms. You know, so this is the whole point of not being distracted. You know, the whole point there, like concentration, concentration. And so I would say here's the thing. If you have realized your attributeless presence of your whole moment beyond personality, what I feel the process is that start treating your moment like an antenna, wherever you are, if you have reached this point of non-dual presence. So when you treat your moment like an antenna, what that means is like the person, once they are themselves, their real karma can begin. The idea is not to get out of karma right away. The idea is to first see what karma is. If the person can have the tolerance to let the moment happen first, they will not only notice their inner realms, they will not only notice they were never a thought, they will be able to ride the waves of how intelligence moves. Everybody is a moment of intelligence. Everybody is that miracle they're looking for in this life. You know, it's the most oddest thing. Consciousness is a mystery. And because the only reason I'm saying it's an antenna, for me, it's not even a concept, but the reason I'm saying it's an antenna, because that's the most multidimensional metaphor for a secular society. That means if you don't want to have an emotional narrative to multidimensionality, that's the most basic technological way. An antenna that receives, and as it receives, it expresses. And sometimes the reception and expression can be instant. An example of this is me as I'm speaking right now, I'm hearing myself simultaneously. Reception and expression instantly. The point is, we have trusted ourselves as an object, and now we trust ourselves not per se as a subject, because the subject is there because there's an object there first. We trust the moment. And for me, from this kind of trust, I sometimes have a notebook around. Sometimes it's like I wait and the inner event arrives and I do something with it. It's no longer like a life based on linear, slow progression into somewhere, you know? That means those who want to work hard, sure, work hard. It's important. But work smart first, so at least if you work hard, you don't waste your time. You know? You don't waste the energetic opportunity. And it's not that there's 100% smart thing. One can say a completely smart action doesn't exist and a completely stupid action doesn't exist. What does that mean? That means even if we say like extinction, inner extinction happens, some like war happens, it's an incredibly stupid event if war happens and life stops, you know? But two, if the earth, we fast forward, let's say 2,000 years, again becomes green, and suddenly there's another civilization, then it again, it wasn't a bad idea. Do you see? As long as there is the other side of the spectrum, that one side of the spectrum can't rule the world. So I would say, as you treat yourself as an antenna, you look at your world. Your teacher doesn't become a relationship. Your teacher becomes unknown attention, as if like you have given freedom to your mind and you watch it. And so if there is no ideological context, then the concept can change in any moment and it doesn't matter because there is no context to the concept. Jordan Peterson says we discovered the future. It's like the person was like, no way, I could have this whole time seen what I could have been or what I can become. Like, why do we have minds? That's the great question. If we're just meant to live as an object here, why do we have minds? Why are we different from the animals again? Sometimes I feel the illusion is individualism. That energy doesn't need proof. When it comes to being, one can do nothing to it, is notice it. You're just being. So here's the thing. If you want to be an enlightened doer, if you want to be enlightened, or if you want to do enlightening things, these are two different notions, I would say. Because when it comes to being, there's inseparability. That means if the person hasn't realized the cup is empty, they won't care to make it full, you know. Sadhguru said to live a fulfilled life means to live life fully, to experience life in all its dimensions. The work of the future will be divided between serving the mind of civilization or the body of civilization. Those who serve the mind of civilization, they express themselves as minds here, as demonstrators of the value of free will. And those who serve the body of civilization, the whole point of biological survival is everybody is a follower. I'm a follower of my stomach's hunger, you know, when I'm hungry. You know, when I'm hungry, my stomach is my guru. You know, I'm like, okay, all right, I gotta honor the guru. This whole life is really a space where you can move in and you can add new dimensions to it. So in life, let's say there's two ways of thinking about things where we're taking away dimensions and we're adding dimensions. Now, the cool thing about adding dimensions is you don't have to take away anything. You know, you don't have to fight the old. You can just see something new. Because really, it's like from if we had jetpacks and we were looking at it from the sky, it's pretty much just, you know, that video of like a cat following a laser beam? Human beings are following images of themselves in the future. So we're pretty much like just moving it around in accordance to the range of our attention. So people actually engage with what's in their attention. Again, a candle in a dark room. You know how people say, I gotta see it to believe it? I think that sentence is flawed. That means it should be the five senses. The person should touch it, taste it, smell it, and hear it, then know if it's real. So technically, when I look at an object, the object is not making a sound. It's not real to my auditory sensory perception, an object. But when somebody speaks, that subject is real to the auditory, but it's not real to the visual sensory. Oh my God. You see what I'm saying? So there is never 100. Oh, the way that this world is designed, there is never 100% satisfaction of all five senses at once. You can see something to believe it, but you cannot hear it to believe it. So that's it. It's the discrimination between What is an object and what is a subject? The object is visibility, the subject is auditory. You got to receive the future from a selfless present and trust it and live it. Trust the signal, trust the antenna that you are. And really, without trust, I mean, you can't even move. That means trust something until you can trust nothing. After you can trust nothing, then you can trust anything. Then it becomes easy when you see that the outcome of all phenomena is a remembrance of the void. It's really exciting, you know. Sometimes it may sound strange, but I've had moments where I've thought about like the end of my own life, and I've wondered, how do I feel about that? How do I feel about my future ending, being an ending? And I realized, well, here's the thing. How do I feel about my future beginning? And it was like there was no content. So really I can't, it's kind of mystery. And this mystery is strange because there's another mystery, life. You know, before death is a mystery, what comes after, it's like what is here now is a mystery. Oh my God, what's going on now? All paths lead to an advanced civilization. Whether the person has a scientific view, religious view, philosophical view, whatever, spiritual view, like you can, there's so many ways things are categorized. You know how many ways there are to cut a cake? There's endless ways to cut up language and act like we know something. But in reality, we have to somehow revive the experiential, the honest experiential dimension of human nature in all the cultural and social programs. I need a quick intermission, guys. I'll be back. A couple minutes. Okay, so I'm back, guys. I guess it is crucial. Sorry, guys, I had a bee situation here. I just fixed it, and I was just looking at the bees, and they all just went away. um, really, I don't know. It all starts from the present in some sense, energetically, in the moment. Everything is present. In accordance to how we consider one moment going on to the next, we create a past, and after experiencing a past, we have noticed that we can have a future. So you can say the future is a recent development. And so it is very easy to act like our ancestors and completely render everything as non-dual. Nature doesn't need man's assistance, but I will tell you, man's attendance to this moment is crucial. And more than it's crucial for nature, it's crucial for man. Because if we think about it, non-duality has no opinion on the world. If I was to think about my future just by looking at how I am in the present, this moment is just what's existing. The future is an illusion. So, from everything being present in here and now, that is not enough. That doesn't satisfy the position of human living. And thinking that you were never here, even nullifying the system, that doesn't even serve the human effort. We not only have to have tolerance for everything visible, but we also require to have a tolerance to be able to study if there is something that surpasses sensory perception. So if we perceive the future as an opportunity, it's not an illusion, it is a choice. In the tech sector, they say the best way to predict the future is to build it. And you can say the best way to predict your own future as a human being is to build and design it. Now, if you are nothing in the moment, you won't care about any design. You would look at things and think everything is just one absolute truth. And that's fine. You can live like that, but it doesn't, again, help the human effort. It's not, I would say enlightenment is not for a human personality. That means it's not, mysticism is not human. The whole point of it is to transcend humanhood by realizing the true nature of reality. So I'm saying that even though they had some deep insights back in the day, but still the idea of the advanced civilization, it's literally what's left. It's the phases. It's like that. The past has happened already. We know how in ancient times we know how far they saw. Now we don't know how far the future can see. And the cool thing about the future is that it's the only thing that gives fulfillment to the purpose of man. That means why should atoms move in empty space? Because there's something to build or do in the future. You know what I mean? Like the future gives purpose. So to just nullify things to a present where you're not suffering, it doesn't satisfy the it may biologically be important. Sometimes in life, like you can be overstressed, overwhelmed by the system you're living in, by your world. But it is so crucial to realize it's a workstation. We're pretty much building a multidimensional airport. We don't realize it. You know, the less mind you have, that's a sign. The sign of less having less intelligence is caring less. Because you think about it, insects don't care, animals don't care, but human beings do somehow. It's so fascinating. It's like out of this self-care we have evolved. Because when we look at genes, like the point of a gene is that it's self-replicating. So we are replicating ourselves in every moment. You know, the future is unique. You can wake up on different days having a different sense of how long your past has been in this life. You know? But when you think about the future, because it hasn't happened yet, it can stay as a single position. You can wake up still having that ideal for the future. Like you see these two skydivers, if they don't aim, if they don't strive towards the new unknown, they will miss it. You know, I would say not this life is not just meant to be a rational equation. It is not just it's not a machine. It's not meant to be lived like a machine. This life is meant to be lived as an antenna which is sensitive to its environment. Do you know? It's like when you can find the source of the problem, you can solve it. I noticed I had my, you know, like a cup of cup of coffee on the table, and I got rid of it. The bee didn't know what to do. Do you see what I mean? So it's like you find the source of the problem, you get rid of it, then it's like the system works. Rumi has this quote. He says, "You got to get rid of all the barriers. Your task is not to seek love, but to get rid of all the barriers you have made against it." And sometimes I think maybe our path is not per se to seek an advanced civilization only, but to get rid of all the barriers that are not allowing us to be an advanced civilization. That means consciously responding to chaos. Because honestly, the more advanced people are, the cooler place it is. Think about a civilization where people were winning, everybody was making sure everybody was winning. Imagine everybody was taking care of everybody's blind spots. One day where you couldn't take care of your own blind spots, suddenly everybody was there, man. So you see, we just have to design a system that cares. Who knew it was that simple? You know, we just needed to care for existence to exist properly. Okay, there we go. To get obsessed about the future, though, you can say that's a point to make because um, sometimes if you really want to live too fast in your inner realms, you don't care for the outer realms. I'll give you an example. Like sometimes when I speak to someone, just regular conversation, I see the end of their conversation instantly. From their tone, from the way they're saying it, from the imagery that if you were to just think of every person like someone speaking to you, everything they said became a scene of a movie. So imagine you listening became like watching a film in your inner realms. You know, it's like you can kind of tell where the film is going based on how the person is opening the scene. You know. Really, the future is not in the individual's control, of course. I speak about many things, but it doesn't mean reality complies. That's all we can do as human beings, of course, to use the instrument given. That means I may not know the purpose of all existence, but at least I can know that the purpose of my existence is to move it. You know, so that's like that's the last honor before the last breath. It's pretty much when fear goes away, the only thing left is endurance. So think as if like you weren't doubting your ability, you were doubting how long you could have your ability. And then you actually attempted to see, and you began to see after some point. I don't know. It's like first there's a sense of ownership of what is going on. Then as the free will harmonizes, the free will is not separate to own anything. So it becomes this strange situation where I think we become, the more we live collectively, the more selfless we will feel in our inner realms to ourselves. I mean, think about it. Just think about this idea if a time traveler, you're a time traveler, imagine, right? And let's say there was a time machine, you get on this time machine, you go back in the past. Now you go in the past, you wear clothing like past people, and you're standing there. And people suddenly, you're, let's say, at a bar in the past, sitting there, somebody comes and says some things to you, do you know? And you just stand there silently, not responding, not saying a single thing, do you know? As if you see so far ahead, you don't need to say a single thing. by the nature of just attention, noticing objective phenomena, noticing material existence, we wonder about where imagination is happening. Because our imagination doesn't manifest, it's like just because a person visualizes an anvil doesn't fall suddenly, onto the ground. So you see, because it still has design, the anvil is somewhere being accessed in the inner realms of the person, but in the outer realms, it's not there. So when the person realizes language in the inner realms is not the phenomena of the outer realms, one realizes if you are to be a creature, you can't be a concept. So if we are acting like concepts that are owning this creaturehood, it becomes a strange situation. It becomes a dysfunction. People's minds are like films. I'm telling you. Every person, their mind is like a projector, film projector. But it's not projecting the film outside. It's receiving, the light is entering its eyes. It's perceiving, it's getting information, is making contact with the creature. And the creature gets to see the information in the inner realms. That means, like, this whole idea we say that we are thinkers and I'm thinking, it's like when you think about the thinker, what does that mean? It becomes nullification. It becomes like a thought. It becomes an object acting like a subject, but because it's never a subject, it's only an object. I think the biggest error we have made, and this goes for the globe, for many cultural programs, the biggest error they have made is that they have thought matter can exist intelligently without the space being intelligent. This is the biggest error. If we realize matter is intelligence because of the space, I would say trusting this life or that time traveler being completely selfless. Selflessness is a sign that the person's from the future. I'm telling you. Silence is the future, imagine. The noise is the past. So a time traveler would be selfless. So you would say that to be selfish is a sign of its engagement by the past. That means we're like temporary, it's like candles, it's like a candle can't take light, it can only give it. And when you realize you're an individual human being and there's a human civilization worth attending to, I will tell you, the future is there. People are looking for jobs, and I was thinking, like, don't we realize how much of the world has not been explored? That means pretty much the person has a choice to go in a competitive market, a market where it's already pre-established, there's big players in it, or the person can try to do something new. And there is an endless accessibility of new ideas here. And the strategy is the person sees how far, what's the newest idea on the moment and wonders what they haven't seen. So if everybody starts doing new things, if we create a civilization where nobody is following anybody, everybody is creating, it would be a deathless workplace. It would be a deathless world. Because we're too defined by the creative effort. There's a word we use, and it's called cosmos. It means order. It's the Greek word for order, cosmos. And what it means is that it's an order placed upon meaningless chaos. You are the order. Consciousness is an order. So that's the thing in life. It's not meant to have meaning. It's a complete random, chaotic thing. The person imposes, puts the order there. So when you become selfless, there is no self to put the order there. But if you treat it as an antenna, it becomes in accordance to every moment. It's as if like that time traveler from the future goes to the past and just smiles. That's it. The ultimate is contentment. Because we're an emotional being, we don't realize, we don't even want ideological truths. We want balance. But we have to see ourselves as, or the attention in the moment as the bringer of the dawn. The world is filled with language. It's a market of ideas here. And if the language makes us ignorant of the experiential value, we will even conceptualize extinction. Imagine in the future, some people are like, no, we need to go extinct. We deserve it. Look at how cruel we've been, you know? And the earth, meanwhile, is shouting at us, don't hurt yourself, my children. Don't hurt yourself. Because it's like Aristotle, there's something called in philosophy, there's the four Aristotelian causes. And so Aristotle, and they're not mutually exclusive, but the idea is that pretty much Aristotle was defining the cause of things through four dimensions. And in one dimension, he was looking, it's called the material cause, the substance. So what does that mean? Like there's this like metal table here. The metal is the cause of the table. It's just you can see the substance being a dimension of what's being there, you know? Then there is the formal cause. The formal cause is the form. So the purpose of this table, table is a table because of the design, because literally of the geometry of the legs of the table and how the table is shaped and whatnot. Then there is the efficient cause. The cause of this is because of a carpenter. I mean, this is a metal table, so I don't know, it's a factory. you know, this table is here because a factory was here, guys. Factories are important. But of course, ethics is very ethical relation. Like how an ethical business is way more important than its product, what product it gives, or how much people like the product. So we had the efficiency cause, the efficient cause, so that it's because of it's made for something. Or I wouldn't say made for something, that's the final cause. So the third dimension is like because the carpenter made it, or the factory made it. And the fourth cause is because there's someone, the table when it has a need to be used. It's something to come. It's like what's the cause of this here table? Because in the future someone's gonna use it to give a talk. Pretty much the third cause is agency. So there's an agent. The reason that has a cause is because there's something to do something with it. So I would say the final cause is kind of like the destiny of the phenomena. And the efficient cause is what's using it. And we can apply this to the human being, believe it or not. We can say that the purpose of us is because the periodic table is here. That's it. I exist because the elements do. We can say I exist. The purpose of human life is look at how unique our hands are, our design is, how there's a unique geometry and symmetry to the human body. It's like just the form, just the shape of life is enough to be a sort of cause of meaning. And then we have from, you can say, the religious mentality, it's in God's will, there's a divine agency, beyond conception, maneuvering things, we're like, some, in modern ways, you would say we're the video game of the higher dimensions or something, you know. So that's the agency, something outside of the thing itself, that's why the thing is caused. And the final cause is that there's a future reason for it. What's the cause of a sandwich? I mean, sandwich was the best metaphor. I don't know why I started with table. Like a sandwich is the best. The final cause of the sandwich is somebody's going to eat it. It's going to be eaten. I wouldn't say somebody's going to eat it. That's going to be agency, but it's going to be eaten. That's the final cause of the sandwich. When we look at the efficiency cause of the sandwich, it's like somebody made the sandwich. When we look at the formal cause, oh, look at the lettuce, look at the tomato, look at the sandwich, And when we look at the lettuce and the tomato and all that, that would be the substance. Look at the shape. Look at the circular shape of the thing. That would be the formal cause. So I'm saying it's like Aristotle saw it in these 4 dimensions. And I would say he said he didn't see them mutually exclusive. What does that mean? That means they weren't all alone. It could mean all of them. All of them are required for there to be full meaning. And I feel physics and chemistry, they're tackling the substance cause. I mean, physics is tackling the formal cause. What do you call it? Physics is tackling the formal cause. Chemistry is tackling the material cause. Philosophy, religion, they're tackling the efficiency cause, the agency cause, And then the final cause is free will. That's the final cause. We can choose our destination. So I would say philosophy tackles the efficient cause, and the advanced communicator tackles. The pilot of consciousness tackles the final cause, the destination of the plane of existence. Because we are piloting the realm on an individual level with our attention. And when we close our eyes, the visual sense goes away. The other senses, of course, are intact. But the mind can still see if the eyes are closed. That's the value of imagination. It's the eyes that can't be taken away. It is where hope is born. And where honor is redeemed. That everything you have seen, beautiful, ugly, good, bad, it has happened in a moment, in an instant, It's phenomenal when I think about it. That every idea I have had, it has come and gone. It has done its performance in my vision, and it has left, And so what can man say to a changing world other than go forth, you know? If you don't aim for the future, you will miss it. If the species doesn't aim for an advanced civilization, it will miss out on the opportunity that it could have always attempted an advanced civilization. An advanced civilization doesn't no longer there is you would say punishment or reward. That system becomes archaic. It becomes vast multidimensionality. That our tolerance becomes a creative effort to see new dimensions to things. If you truly care for the present, you will see why man is designed to see the future, not to run away from its suffering, not to fear what's coming, but to run towards it consciously. I will tell you a story. This imperial swordsman, it's a Zen story. Let's say it's set back in the day. This imperial swordsman that would teach the emperor's army how to fight with swords. He comes home and he sees his wife is cheating with his servant. And the servant, in some sense, realizes this and is shocked. And what had happened really was that, I mean, comments in a common sense way, you could think about it, that the husband was always at the emperor's service, kind of training the army, so the wife was alone with the servant, you know? It's like, so, so what I mean by that is like it wasn't technically the servant's fault. But, anyways, the moment had occurred like that. And so this imperial swordsman catches them in the act, and this servant's like, holy shit in his mind. And the imperial swordsman, he comes into the house, and as he sees the event take place, the both members stop, the wife and the person. And all that he does, his first thing he says, he tells the guy to leave the room. He says, step outside of the house, you know? And he doesn't say anything to the wife. Just pure silence, you know? And he takes the guy out of the house, you know? And he throws a sword. This is like a story back in the day, you know? And he throws, like, soldiers, you could say, had two swords. He throws one of the swords. The imperial swordsman throws the sword. The servant looks at it. It's a strange moment. Before the servant picks it up, he realizes the servant was actually a very innocent person in the story, and he was a disciple. He was a disciple of this temple, you know. So that means he was living a very simple, believe it or not, kind of life. And what happens is the servant remembers his guru, let's say it's a Zen story, so I would say like is like the Zen master that he is devoted to or something, you know. And so right there, he says the name of the Zen master. Then the imperial swordsman is listening, and he says, "I have to speak to him before I can fight with you, and I will be back here tomorrow," something like that. And in the story, this is at a time where people had honor. It was more important to have honor than to actually die. Do you know what I mean? Like it was a point where the humanhood had a value on its own, just being it. You know. Of course, back in the day, people were savages too. I mean, don't get me wrong. So what happens is the imperial swordsman, uh, swordmaster, he looks at him and he says, "Okay, the sage is an important person, you know." And so the guy goes to the sage after that moment, you know? And he goes to the sage, and the sage is meditating, you know? And he waits there silently, kind of shaking, kind of. The Zen master comes out of the meditation, and the servant explains the situation. And the Zen master goes back into meditation, and he opens his eyes with a new insight, and he looks at the kid and the servant, and he's about to tell him something, and the servant's like, okay, you know, I'm about to, you know, I'm totally devoted to this temple, and, you know, never going back to that world of my karma. The sage says, buddy, you can't run away. This is your destiny. And the guy gets surprised. He thought the sage was going to help him. You know, and the sage says, no, this is your path. You have to keep walking this path. You know, and the sage tells him one word of advice. And what's that word of advice? Live as if it's your last day in this existence. And the kid goes back the next day. And the swordsman at the same time, the Imperial Swordsmaster is there waiting. You know, the Imperial Swordsmaster has been dishonored. He's not letting this go. And so, as the kid appears into the scene, the same place they were the day before, the Imperial Swordmaster has already thrown the sword on the ground and is waiting. And this guy, the servant, just picks up the sword, and he's gone into this frenzy where literally he feels he's going to stop existing right now. And he starts fighting with this intensity where the Swordmaster realizes, okay, it's like it started. And there is something in the eyes. There's something in the eyes of this servant, this guy, where the fear, the honest fear of not existing has shocked him to a point where the guy, this Imperial Swordsman, just sees in this guy's eyes that he's not letting himself die in this moment. The Imperial Swordsman sees the gaze of the servant, sees the intensity. His grip becomes loose. The servant manages to hit the sword out of the hand of the Imperial Swordmaster. And the Imperial Swordmaster is shocked at the same time, being like, "Oh my God, this next level warrior was my servant this whole time." You know, as the Imperial Swordmaster's sword falls, the servant's panting and frenzy stops. And there's a silent moment where the Imperial Swordmaster looks at the servant and just nods and says, all right, you're free to go. And the servant drops the sword and he leaves. And as the story says, 3 days later, he attains nirvana. He realizes the true nature of reality. That is our task now as a species, as a civilization, you know. The birds have flown separately long enough, you know. In Persian mythology, I mean, mythology tends to be inspired out of poetry. In the work of Attar, there is the Conference of the Birds. He speaks about all the birds in the world gathered around. and they flew in the sky to find the phoenix, the legendary phoenix. And as they all flew, eventually the birds got tired. More and more of the birds stopped flying. And at the end, there were only 30 birds. These 30 birds realize that they are the phoenix. That's the whole moral of the story. They realize they are the phoenix. They are the only ones that could attempt an effort towards the ultimate. The era of optimism has passed. Right now, it's the era of just advanced communication and design. We're opening up to our multidimensional natures as beings. I mean, technically, it's a cool time to be alive. If people are sharp, many people should just focus on trying to find the new dimensions of phenomena that hasn't been explored yet. Every idea I'm saying, like sometimes in these talks I give, there is criticism, of course, and the criticism that comes in the chat section sometimes, I'm like, that time could have been used by that person to find something new, you know? Yet they were seeing how the past hadn't worked properly or something. Of course, the world is, I would say, it's alive in our eyes. Like literally in our eyes. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. And as Buckminster Fuller says, human beings are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. That means if when you dare to step into novelty sincerely, then I would say you have found the real earth. Let me see what I wrote in the chat in the subtitle. Why care for the world at all? Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the answer is because we can. If we couldn't, then there's no reason to care for it. If we didn't have language, if we didn't have some sort of advanced evolutionary advantage, I wouldn't say anything. I would say the purpose of life is to, I don't know, just graze. Just be sheep and eat and just graze like sheep. But because we're not sheep, we have minds. We're lions. It's a different scenario. It's like the purpose of the lion is to roar. You know, the nature of human life is for the person to express. When you care for the world, you give it a chance to surprise you. But when you don't care for the world, you have abandoned the possibility. Again, like Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's really what I feel kind of my efforts are when I wake up. I just see potential, probabilities, and then I implement them. And then you get an instant feedback the moment you do anything in this life. And if you notice that instant feedback, then you'll stop perceiving the mind as a sort of idea. It starts becoming event based. So an idea is like, I remember I created this term, I called it eventum. Just like how we see an atom and we see inside the atom, it's like smaller particles. So similarly, we can see the personality as an event, and this event is composed of smaller events. And I called the events eventrons. There's a talk, guys. So there's a talk I've given on it. If you search the eventum, eventrons, you'll find it. the mind seems to be uncharted territory. So what is the strategic response to it is to pretty much unify and create exhibitions into the unknown. I feel when it comes to psychology, the most efficient strategy is to treat it as a global tribe. That means if aliens invaded right now, this idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that's when the species suddenly stops fighting. We're like, okay, let's get these creatures off our turf, then continue our fight, you know? But it's an instant of unity. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Okay, there's a question. Yusuf says how to stop being angry about someone. The easiest way is to realize you don't know them and to stop having an opinion on who they are and just let nature handle it, you know? Let me tell you, the thing, unless the person is causing you suffering, I don't know what kind of anger you're talking about, Yusuf. I would say, though, think of it this way. Um, whose responsibility is your house is whose responsibility is like, I'm just saying, like, your mind is you have to pilot your mind. So if you're angry at someone, you have to wonder for yourself why. And then you got to wonder if it's worth it. And if it's worth it, then you got to wonder if it's like necessary. And if it's like you think 100% it's necessary to be angry, then try something out and then, I don't know, at least be conscious enough to get rid of the anger. Because sometimes like a person can get angry to prove a point. But to get angry at someone, I mean, that's pretty much like this actor Anthony Hopkins. He's like, what people think of me is none of my business. So technically, it's none of your business if you're angry about someone. But I would say the biggest clue is that because we don't have the other person's eyes, we're angry at something that something about that person makes us feel about ourselves. The anger is actually from you. So the best way to get rid of the anger is to realize what is off with you. You know? I would suggest something like that. And I'll tell you the best thing, Yusuf. If there is anger, just keep it in the inner realms. It doesn't have to be expressed. That means wait it out. Wait out your anger. The best thing is if you're really super angry and you can't control it, lie down on the ground. I'm telling you, there's something about gravity when you lie down on the ground, like, you know, looking at the ceiling or looking at the sky, you know, like there's something about that you don't feel like getting angry when you've lied down. It's very hard to get angry, I'm telling you, like, you can try it. If you're an angry person and when you talk, suddenly you get angry quickly, I'm telling you, just lie down on the ground and you'll see it's impossible to get angry. Because the moment you get angry, you want to get up to prove a point. The ego wants to stand up to make a point, you know? There is this thing, I would say, let's call it backpedaling, where I have been in situations where I have gotten angry and someone else has gotten angry, and I've seen this is like burning the house down, you know, of the moment. So what I've done is I've just quickly paused the moment and I'm like, hey, this is how I'm seeing what you're doing. Do you know why are you doing this? And the moment I can't tell you, sometimes when you shift gears, shift degrees of a problem, you see new dimensions to it which could potentially solve it. I don't know, it depends. I mean, here's the point. Isaac Asimov says violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. What does that mean? That means if you're getting angry to do something, that means it's like You haven't noticed the world has there's nothing that says the world has to listen to your inner realms. That means I will tell you, this is a smart person who they're willing to be wrong in a situation, do you know? Not if it's a super important situation, but I'm saying if it's a let's say not an important situation, they're willing to be wrong because they see, let me tell you, people are not people speak through their own reflection to others. That means everybody who's listening to me, think about it. There's 8 billion types of human beings. That means there's 8 billion versions of this talk being heard right now. Do you know? You have to forgive the world that didn't know better. That's it, pretty much. And there's something strange. I've been in situations where also there's been anger where I haven't thrown firewood into the fire. What I mean by that is I have just been unresponsive. That means the person's been angry and I've acted as if like, what is this? Did somebody just burp? Like what you know what I mean? Like it's like, here's the thing: the person chooses what they authorize to influence them. And if you're not living a conscious life, most likely who you feel you can be you don't feel you are in the control of it. If you feel you're in the passenger seat of life, that self that is considering it's in the passenger seat is not you. That means you are not the you that is that is not you. Do you get it? I mean, this could be technically existential haiku. Who am I? There was a changing world. Who am I? The world changed. That's it. This technically renders us incapable of attaching to ideology permanently. That means because we're not thoughts and because they come and go, the best approach I feel is to be playful with it. And to treat language as a technology, you know. Aziz says, Mr. Within, is imagination more important than knowledge? Um, I mean, to Einstein it was. Albert Einstein has a quote where he says, imagination is a sign of true intelligence. That means when we were thinking, I mean, why do we want to know more? To be aware of this intelligence that we are, right? You are something already. You want knowledge to know more about how you're being something already, you know? Imagination is important if you want to grow. But if you want to settle down somewhere, you don't need to be creative at all. If you want to live life like a machine, there's no creativity required. Just find a comfortable system and repeat it. That's it. You know? In regards to the inner realms, it's different. For example, I could tell you in the inner realms for me, like when I wake up, every night I sleep, I notice something new about the day. Literally, I can't sleep until I see something new about the day. I don't know how to say it. Like, you know, it's I said it in one talk, the reception threshold, and everybody has a threshold, a certain, like it's the kind of part of health. Think of it this way: you can't keep your body still like a statue. You got to actually move through the day to be alive as a human being. You know. So similarly, you got to move your mind. So how does the mind move though? It doesn't move by thinking you're the same self every day. It moves in accordance to that novelty of there being the presence of an experiential dimension, unconditional to whatever way you have positioned the meaning of, I don't know, whatever we see as a condition, as a circumstance. It's all contained. Pretty much it's like we're trying to put the world in a bag, in a language bag. It's like somebody, you know. You know? Oh man. One day somebody's gonna be like, Mr. Within, how can you talk about language? I'll be like, that's the only thing we can talk about. That's the only thing we're talking through. It's the most important event, inner event, that is real somehow. Because when I think about these words, when I think about the ideas that right now as a being I hold to share, these ideas are not physical. So the only explanation is that something is being witnessed somewhere else. Now we think this is inside. We think it's something from the inside, as if it's like it's not one projector. It's like it's like putting two film projectors on the same wall, on the same position. So it's literally two meaningless films being played at the same time. Sorry, two meaningful films by being played at the same time being meaningless. I would say imagination is important if you want to create space in your life, if you want the new. If you're okay with your boredom, I don't know. You don't need imagination. Knowledge is more important then. Because if you want to repeat something, yeah, just get knowledge. Just practice. There's some elements to my life, for example, when it comes to these talks, like as I'm living here on this planet, it's like these talks are like training indirectly for me. What I mean by that is like that's the whole point. It's literally a hobby. Guys, I just something so on a tangent. I just realized why if let's entertain a fantasy idea, if Lord of the Rings was there, I think hobbits would be okay, whatever. Imagine the first hobbit that wore shoes was like written in the history books as like the hobbit that saw that progressed hobbit civilization. Yo, imagine Gandalf went to. Sorry, guys, I'm just being playful. I feel like. Imagine Gandalf went to the Shire, and Gandalf was like, "What am I doing? I'm taking a wagon of firecrackers. I should bring in a wagon of shoes here." Gandalf starts selling shoes in the Shire. Like, I can't understand why there was no. It's like that's definitely one thing. It's like nobody in the Shire. It's like It's like a hobbit turned to another hobbit. And it's like you don't understand what it's like being in my shoes. Then they both looked at their feet and started laughing. I don't know. Imagination is important. That's the whole thing of treating yourself as an antenna. The new signals are imagination. I would say if the person just studies their attention, that's kind of like the most advanced, technically, like a martial art training for the mind. You getting acquainted with the nature of what your mind is. That means imagine somebody came up to you and it's like, what is your mind? Don't you want to feel like you know it? Don't you want to feel like you are aware what's going on to some degree to the intelligent activity? So I would say it's not even about imagination and about knowledge. It's about the experiential living event and noticing it. So noticing, it doesn't matter. Sure, if you need an image, like if it, sometimes I use science fiction to share ideas. It's like Imagination is technically knowledge is imagination that has been accepted upon reality. Yeah, knowledge is just imagination that is uh, harmonious with the outer realms. Because it becomes the biggest question, you know? Are we imagining our memories, or are we remembering? Is our imagination, are we remembering our imagination, you know? It's a question. Because everybody has a different DNA, technically, every human being should, I feel, archive their eyes on paper and share it with their civilization. So that means even if in this life, you know, there's a lot of people kind of that are, I would say, they are not seen by the world. The best thing you can do is share your eyes, your honest eyes, I would say, because that's the only thing that's missing in a civilization dominated by meaningless imagery. Really, sometimes when I turn on the TV, I'm like, what is this? Like, I think about the entertainment sector guys, and I'm like, why don't these guys understand? Just make education entertainment, and everybody would love to learn. That means, imagine, like, instead of a teacher speaking, there was like a 3D film the child would see, or maybe a cyberspace virtual reality game that the child had to pass in order to learn the concept. You know, I think that would be really schools in the future, where concepts actually become worlds where the person can engage. Anyways, guys, if there's more questions, keep them coming. If not, I guess I gotta aim for the future. And you know, Lao Tzu says you gotta let go of who you are now to be who you're meant to, you know? Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings.